In this video, we're going to be applying for a $10,000 grant step by step together. Let's get started. Hey everyone, I'm Rinde from AskRinde, and welcome to the #1 community for real estate income, grants, and credit. So if you'd like to apply with me for this $10,000 grant together, so you can learn how to actually apply for grants consistently, make sure you watch the video to the end and leave a comment below if you need help with anything. It's so important to learn how to apply for grants, and it's more important to know how to organize your business and order your business so you can actually apply for grants consistently all around the country. So we're going to be applying for a new $10,000 grant for small businesses, and this grant is actually located in Arcadia, California. Now, my business is here in New Jersey, but I'm actually applying for this grant in California. That's because our business is properly set up, like I teach you in our Grants Masterclass. So this is actually a $10,000 grant that we're going to be applying for step by step. And I'll show you some of the things that you need to do and think of and actually be in a position so that you can actually apply for these grants. So these $10,000 grants are being pulled from about $750,000 in ARPA funds that's been set aside for this grant program to be able to help these small businesses. And the grants can be used for physical improvements, digital marketing, which is huge. Many businesses actually need a digital footprint. They need a digital presence online. They need to actually change their target of their customers to draw more customers in and drive their revenues up. So without further ado, let's get into the step-by-step process of applying for this $10,000 grant. So we're going to be applying for this new $10,000 grant. And as we start this process, I want to share with you 10 keys that you're going to need for every grant application. So regardless of the grant size or the grant location or what type of grant it is, you want to actually be aware of these 10 keys because they're going to be relevant as you start the process of increasing your chances of getting grants coming into your business as an income stream. Remember, we want to actually apply for grants consistently to get them coming into our business as an income stream. So the first step we want to take before we start applying for our grant and submitting our grant application is we want to look at the location. So if the grant is location specific, we want to basically be aware of that early on and not waste our time if we don't fit that criteria. So the first thing we want to do is actually take a look to see if the grant is actually location specific. Now, oftentimes, depending on where you actually source the information, they will share with you or indicate if the grant is location specific. So what location specific means is that the grant is specifically earmarked for businesses that are actually in a specific geographical location or region. So after we pull up our grant application to start the process, the first thing we want to do in the first key for every grant submission and grant application is to look at the guidelines. So we're going to actually find the guidelines for the grant. And normally they will have this in a downloadable PDF form, or they may have it posted on their website. So for this particular grant, they actually have the guidelines link here. I'm going to click on that. It's going to take us over to our guidelines. So guidelines are the blueprint and the scope of what you need to be aware of in order to be able to submit the grant application. There are guidelines, there's eligibility requirements, and there's a framework that the grant bodies actually put together that you need to actually operate within in order to be in compliance and submit your grant application for review. The guidelines are also the foundation and the grant body's disclosure to you of all the criteria that needs to be met in order to qualify for the grant. So the first thing we want to do as we start to go through the guidelines is we want to actually look at the source for the grant. Now, many times this is very important because you want to make sure that you start to identify grant sources. Now, in this case, for this specific grant, these are ARPA funds. As we can see here, these are coming from the America's Rescue Plan Act. So these are funds that have been set aside to create an ARPA small business grant program for businesses in this specific location. So requirements are very important because they either qualify or disqualify you for the grant. And is one of the first sections in every grant guidelines format. So they're giving you the information up front and letting you know what is required. Requirements cover everything from how your business relates to the grant, from qualifications, whether or not you are qualified or not qualified, to taxes, whether you're current on taxes or not current on taxes, to insurance. In some cases, some grant bodies actually require that you actually have insurance, and also registration. Is your business registered, and is it properly registered in the city or state? So for this particular grant, they actually list their business eligibility requirements. And in this case, they actually want the business located within the city limits of Arcadia. Secondly, they actually want the business to have a commercial or mixed-use zone property. Third, they actually want the business to be independently owned and operated. Now, we're seeing this a lot with grants all around the country. They actually are looking for independently owned and operated businesses to give grants to. Now, there are separate grants for franchises and businesses with that business model. However, the majority of grants that we're seeing from ARPA and other grant sources are going towards independently owned and operated businesses. So that's one of the eligibility criteria for this particular grant. Secondly, they actually want your employee count. Now, we're going to touch on that just a little later, but for this particular grant, they actually want 25 full-time or equivalent employees or less. So the requirements will give you clarification on where you are and where the grant stands, and if there's a match that can be made. So the amount is actually while we're here. That's why we're applying for the grant, in order to be able to receive the money, the funds. So this is actually where we actually are allocating whether or not this is worth it or not. We want to look at the grant guidelines and go through the process to basically see what they're actually putting forth. If there's going to be more or less, and is it worth it for us to go through the process to apply for the grant. Now, keep in mind with the amounts, depending on the grant source, the initial amount offered can actually be increased, or there can be subsequent amounts offered to you as you actually go through the process and apply for the grant. So in some cases, you may not get the amount on this round, but they actually may have subsequent rounds where you actually are set up and already in queue and in their system to receive those amounts. So employee count is crucial when you're applying for grants, because oftentimes the grant source is actually looking to see what type of jobs you're creating in the community and what's your community involvement or what's your growth process for the local community. So employee count is actually indicative of this, whether or not your business is producing and actually helping to actually spawn jobs in the local community. So employee count actually sometimes qualifies or disqualifies businesses. Documents. So as we know, this is very important. You actually have to have your documents and all your ducks in a row when you're going to apply for a grant. So in general, there's a general scope and requirement of documents that you will need, which will be your basic and your general base business documents, such as your business registration, a copy of your EIN, a copy of your tax returns if you filed, and also bank statements. In some cases, some grant bodies may want a P&L or profit and loss and other documentation. And in the case with this particular grant, because they actually want a business with an anchored commercial footprint, they may require a lease. So depending on the grant that you're going for, you may actually have to show proof that you actually have lease space, and that can be something that can help you to be able to get the grant. Oftentimes we see that a lot with match grants, and this is something that you need to be aware of. If you're actually running a retail business, or if you're not, if you're going for the grant like this particular grant, you may need a commercial lease or a lease to prove that you actually have that space. So with the documents, it's always good to take the approach of start with what you have and then add later. So in some cases, we apply for grants and we don't have all the documents on standby at that moment. We'll apply and get our grant in submission. And then as they actually request for documents, additional documents, or documents later to provide, we'll provide it at that time. Use of funds. Now, this is a very important one when you're going through the guidelines. You want to make sure that you identify what the funds can be used for. So in some cases, some grants have restriction on what you can use the funds for. And it's got to make sense for you. Like I shared earlier, when you look at the grant amount, it's got to make sense. When you look at the whole grant application and the whole possibility of you pursuing this, it has to make sense. Remember, we're using this as an option, as an income stream for our business. And we're going to actually continuously and consistently apply for grants all around the country. Now here, when it comes to the use of funds, it's important to actually understand what they will allow you to use the funds for. We're seeing some grant sources that will allow you to use the funds to be able to cover expenses, to get reimbursed for expenses that you've actually lost due to the pandemic and other business turn down or shortage or inflation, etc. And in some cases, there are some grant sources that want you to use this specifically for improvement or specific guidelines when it comes to marketing. So as we can see here in their permitted use of funds section, for marketing, they actually will allow you to implement new digital marketing initiatives and also update your business logo, your branding, etc. However, they do not want payments to media companies for print or online advertising or direct advertising costs. These are not eligible expenses through this program. So these are the fine print that you actually have to look at when it comes to use of funds. Make sure you actually study the use of funds section when you're submitting your grant application to ensure that you're not wasting your time. Issuance of funding. So this is very important because I find oftentimes many small businesses don't know about this. And this is so key in the entire process because you've actually done all of this to get to the position where you can actually receive the grant. And a lot of times businesses and individuals and entrepreneurs want to know, well, when will I get the money? So the issuance of funding section in your grant applications will indicate to you how and when the grants will actually be dispersed. This is where you heard me talk about in the past short-term and long-term grants. And in some cases, the grants are actually given up in a few weeks. Some are given out months later. Some are giving out in disbursements. Some are giving out in full. So in the case of this particular grant, the initial disbursement, as you can see here, is 50% of the approved grant after you submitted an itemized cost estimate. And they're going to then go ahead and start out with the 50%, and then the remaining balance will be dispersed when the business actually has finally completed the project. So again, depending on the grant source and the guidelines, the issuance of funding varies, not only in time, but also amounts and percentages of how much they will disperse. So we're starting with our grant application here, and as we can see, is asking us to provide the following information. So we're going to start the process by including our business owner's name, and if there's any other business owner's name, we're going to include it there. Our email address, we're going to fill it out on this line. We're going to also add our phone number, contact phone number, which is very important because in some cases they will actually want to call you and verify the information or call you to basically ask for more documents. Next, we're going to include our business name. Next, we're going to include our business address. Next, we're going to include the property owner's name. So in this case, since this is actually tied to real estate, they actually need that information because this is actually indicative of the type of grant. Next, they're going to be asking for your business category. What category does your business fit in? And oftentimes, I always ask entrepreneurs this when we do our calls, because this is all about preparing yourself so you can actually make this an income stream for your business. So what category is your business? You're going to check that off here. And if your business category is not listed, then you're going to check off other and also specify. Next, we're going to check off whether or not our business is a franchise. And as I shared earlier, if you've gone through the guidelines, you'll know whether or not you actually fit that criteria. If you are, then you know that for this particular grant, you should probably not apply because you're just going to be wasting your time. Next, they're looking for the number of months and years you've been at your current location. So as I shared earlier, depending on the tier, for tier 1, they want you to be in that location for a minimum of 1 year. For tier 2, they actually don't have as stringent a criteria, but they actually want you to have been in existence, but they don't have a criteria where it has to be a minimum of 1 year. Next, they want to know if your business has additional locations. Now, in some cases, as I shared earlier, this also can be a criteria in a qualifying or disqualifying criteria, simply because some grant sources don't want businesses to have multiple locations because it's indicative of the fact that they're seemingly successful and they don't need the grant. So they want businesses to have maybe 2-3 locations at most. If your business has 6 or 7 locations, they would believe that you can actually pull resources from elsewhere to be able to keep your business afloat. And next, for this particular grant, they're giving you the grant proposal requirements. So in this case, they want you to attach a short narrative, 1-page proposed project or initiative that will be completed if you're giving the funds. They actually want you to disclose what is your best possible positive impact that will be at the end of this entire process. Will it mean better experience for your customers coming into the business? Will it beautify the community? Will it position you where you can actually have more space and use of the space to create more jobs? Will it help your business go online and actually have a digital footprint and expand online? These are all things that they want disclosed that will actually position them to give you the grant or see why your business needs it over another business. Next is the disclosure that simply says that the applicant hereby declares under penalty of perjury that all information submitted for this application is true and correct. And finally, you're going to be including your signature, and also you're going to be including your property owner's signature, because this is going to be changes made to the building. If you are not the owner and there's another owner, you are going to sign and also date. So this is a simple one-page $10,000 grant application. And again, I've given you 10 tips and keys to use for every grant application that you submit. Whether it's a one-page grant application like this $10,000 grant application, or is actually multiple forms that you have to go through 4, 5, 6 pages. The criteria is almost going to be similar in many cases, but the framework using these 10 tips and keys are going to basically help you win every single time. So the grant is being administered by the Economic Development Division at Arcadia City Hall, and the grant application opens up on October 24th, and the deadline to apply for this $10,000 grant is December 29th. So you can get more information and apply for these grants by going directly to the website at arcadiaca.gov/small business. So if you'd like to learn more of how to apply for grants, if you'd like to get the tools, and most importantly, put your business in order so you can apply for grants consistently all around the country, make sure you join us for our Grants Masterclass by going to my website at AskRinde.com, clicking on Grants, and getting started today. We also provide the structure, business plan, templates, and all the tools you'll need to be able to apply for grants consistently all around the country. So make sure you actually join us for our Grants Masterclass by going to my website at AskRinde.com, clicking on Grants, and getting started today. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. You can also email me. My email address is AskRindeNetwork@gmail.com. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Until next time, thank you so much for watching.